by the client are both being sacrificed to the lowest human mentalities, whose contribution to the process is the injection not of knowledge but of threats. In other words, fear. That's what the managers of managed care have to offer. Now, please note that it makes no difference in this kind of system whether the manager is nominally a private entity or a public one, whether he operates out of an HMO, in this case that would be a hair maintenance organization, or a haircut insurance company, or an official federal office. In all cases, the manager is still the government, directly or indirectly, because it's the government which makes the power of the managers possible. It's the government which created the escalating cost crisis to begin with, and it's the government which is encouraging, rewarding, regulating the whole new collectivist system. So the hair administrators in Washington and all the state capitals, and I'm sure down the street from you, begin to manage. How do they cut costs? Directives start to erupt. We must limit the number of barbers. We must limit the time spent on haircuts. We must limit the permissible type of hairstyles. The managers begin to split hairs about how many hairs a barber should be allowed to split. New computerized offices of records filled with inspectors and red tape shoot up. Some barbers, it seems, are still getting too rich. They must be getting more than their fair share of the national hair. So barbers have to start applying for certificates of need in order to buy razors, while peer review boards are established to assess every stylist's work, both the dishonest and the overly honest alike, to make sure no one is too bad or too good or too busy or too unbusy. In the end, there are lines of wretched customers waiting for their chance to be routinely scalped by bored, hog-tied haircutters, some of whom remember dreamily the old days when somehow everything was so much better. End of analogy. If this is what would happen under government-managed hair care, what else can possibly happen? It's already happening under the idea of health care as a right. Health care in the modern world is a complex, scientific, technological service. How can anybody be born with a right to such a thing? They can't. That's what I say. Forrest, what do you say? Welcome to the show, Forrest.
Hello, Doctor. I like to say I'm glad this program is here. I read Atlas Shrugged approximately 12 years ago, and it was a life-changing experience.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
I agree basically with most of what you say. I just want to point out the last gentleman talked about representing a physicians group.
Yes.
And in the reality, there are only two legal monopolies in this country. They are causing most of the problems in this country.
I bet I know. Can I just guess? Are you going to say licensing?
Well, I'm going to say that the legal profession is a monopoly set up by the government, which is allowed to police itself.
But you mean a monopoly because the government has licensing powers?
Yeah, the government has licensed two legal monopolies.
I agree with you.
The medical profession and the legal profession.
You're entirely right.
Cause this country a lot of problems.
Well, I don't know that they are the sole cause. I certainly don't think licensing is the sole cause, but I agree with you. There is no justification whatever in a government arrogating to itself the privilege to license the practitioner of any field. There's no justification whatever. In a proper free country, you put up your shingle, and it's up to the consumers to investigate and see, do you have the skills or not? There can be voluntary professional associations that, physicians or lawyers could join that uphold ethical standards and that, denounce in their own literature and so on the ones that are bad practitioners. That is the only way you would get quality, and that leaves the country and any applicant free to try to prove himself. But when you get the government with the power of licensing, as you say, they can then impose onerous requirements, impose completely skewed curricula and requirements on people who will try to enter the field and, in effect, make it a legal monopoly. And that certainly is very bad, and I agree with that completely. Thanks for your comment, Forrest. Eileen.
Good afternoon.
You are a nurse, my screener says.
Yes.
Does that mean you know all about medicine?
No, it just means I know the nursing aspects of medicine.
Okay. Tell me something that you think I should know.
Well, first of all, I don't think the government, the federal government, issues licenses. It's a state issue.
Is this for nursing or doctors?
Both.
Okay. I'm against both. I'm not the kind of conservative that thinks the federal government should give its powers to the state government. I think they should all get out of the way.
I'm not either. But you see, I don't believe that all men are created equal.
Well, in what sense? Because I may agree with you.
In the sense that we are not all created with the same height, the same weight.
Oh, absolutely.
We're not created with the same amount of brain cells. We're not created with the same amount of skill.
All true. So what is the moral that follows from
to
it?
equal opportunity to go out and do the best that you can do.
Okay. Well, that depends on what you define opportunity as, but if you define opportunity as freedom, then I agree with you. If you define opportunity as we have to have a government office of opportunity,
No, we do not.
And then you make an application, say, I was born poor and I didn't get to go to Harvard and so on, so can you give me some money so I'll have an opportunity? Then I'm against it.
Mr. Peikoff,
Yes.
I sat and monitored a biology class that I had to have because of equal opportunity.
Right.
And at drop time, there were only 9 in the class. But for that period of time, from the beginning of the semester till drop time, I had to come in and monitor on my own.
And why? How did that give you equal opportunity?
Didn't. That's what
But I mean, the government thought it did.
Well, I know, but
But why did they think it did?
I don't know. But getting back to...
Okay, so what is your main point, Eileen?
My main point is the worst thing that could happen to this country is government health.
God knows you're right. Amen.
I'll tell you why. Because all the people setting out all these rules and regulations do not have a clue as to what actually goes on in a hospital. They load us down with regulations that have nothing to do with patient care. The patient could die as far as they're concerned, and the patients are dying because of these HMOs.
I couldn't agree with you more, and one day soon we're going to have on this show a panel of doctors who will tell horror stories of what's going on in the HMOs.
I could tell you because I've just spent 35 years of my life in the operating room.
All right, give us one, and you know what? If you can give your phone number to the screener, maybe we'll invite you on the panel, and we're going to expose what's really going on in these HMOs, which is horrendous. I was at a party last week. I'm not allowed to give the name. I mean, I wish I could, but one of the top guys of one of the big HMOs in Southern California was there. And I said to him, I've got this radio show on KIEV. I'd like to get into the issue of HMOs and the quality of care. How about if we have a debate? And, you'll have equal time, I'll be quiet, etc. He said to me, are you kidding? You think we want publicity? We've got it all made already. We're the establishment now. You go and whistle. I don't have to debate on your show.
But you know what is even more behind his statement?
Yeah.
I am trying in my own way to get to the insurance companies, and I cannot find out who sets policy. Only a physician can set policy, but they won't tell you. And what if the physician hasn't practiced medicine in 20 years?
Which is very probable.
Of course. And if you take a long weekend, medicine has changed. And the insurance companies will not tell you this. The insurance companies do not tell the people that have their policies that they make deals with hospitals. And they cut costs, and the hospital's going to get so much money. It's called capitation.
Oh, capitation, yeah. And
but that savings is not passed on to the patient. They're still paying through the nose, and they're not getting the care.
Oh, I know. I know that perfectly well. The idea is the hospital gets a certain grant from the government per patient, given the type of diagnosis, regardless of what they do for them. So the best case scenario from the point of view of the HMO or the hospital on this plan is for the patient to drop dead right after admission. Then they get all the payment. They don't have to do anything.
Do you know that when you go to your physician, an HMO physician, and you sit across the desk from him, you represent exactly 18 cents.
I'm sure of that. That's exactly what, in the old days, they used to say your life wasn't worth a plugged nickel.
Exactly.
And today it's worth an HMO visit. Listen, I got to go, Eileen, but I'm going to put you on hold. If you want to be good enough to give your number to our screener, we'll talk to you about coming on a panel. We're going to dissect HMOs once and for all. Thanks for calling very much. Just before we go to a break, I want to make one comment on something Eileen said. She said the regulators don't have a clue. That is not an accident. A doctor who has a clue wants to practice medicine. His interest is in the field. You try to project the mentality that actually gets a medical degree and prefers to sit in Sacramento issuing decrees on how other doctors should practice. Just imagine if you were writing a novel, the character of such a mentality, and you won't be surprised that these regulators don't have a clue. They don't want a clue. They want power. And that's all that they're there to wield, and you are the victim. We're going to take a pause for these messages. It's 3:02. My name is Leonard Peikoff. We're discussing the topic, is health care a right? Hi, Paul. You're on the Leonard Peikoff Show. What do you think?
Well, I think it is a right, but in the truest sense of the word.
What's the truest sense?
Well, you know, a right used to cry, leave me alone. Now it cries, stick 'em up, hand it over, you know. But in the truest sense of the word, health is a right, and the government interferes with that.
What does it mean to say it's a right? You mean you have a right to take actions to heal yourself?
Yeah.
Well, then that
sense interferes with that. The two examples I have in mind are, one, the FDA keeps a lot of medicines, keeps you from getting them. They might, so they are interfering with your right to
True.
care.
Absolutely.
And the other one I was thinking of, Mrs. Clinton's other issue was inoculations for children.
Right.
And she centralized all the vaccines in a place, I heard this on the news, back in the East Coast. They all went bad. So if you by that act of centralization, if you needed the vaccine, it was hard to get it.
Yeah, that's inevitable. But let me ask you, what do you mean by her other issue? You mean one issue is Whitewater and her other issue?
Healthcare plan.
Oh, her health. Oh, I see what you mean. Because I associate her only with Whitewater and the question of whether her husband should or should not punch Bill Sapphire for him having stated that she's a congenital liar, which I think is a kind way of putting it. But getting back to your point, I agree with you entirely. The Food and Drug Administration is a corrupt agency by its very nature, should be abolished completely. There should be no government inoculations, but I dispute your use of the word right. Right, historically, means something that the government should protect. And when you say we have a right to health care, you're equivocating, because what you're really saying is we have a right to take the actions to earn health care. But that's
I
not...
agree with that.
Pardon?
The right, they have a negative duty not to interfere.
Not to interfere, but then the right is not a right to health. It's a right to act, and that's what's called liberty. Mm-hmm. You have a right to liberty and anything you can get. Otherwise, you could say, well, look, I got a right to a wristwatch. And you say to me, what do you mean? And I say, well, I didn't mean I have a right to be given a wristwatch. I mean a right in the purest sense. Well, but I mean, if you're going to use words in that way, then you could list the entire dictionary and say, I got a right to bananas and carrots. This is ridiculous. When you want to use terms philosophically, you got to abstract. You got to say what is in common among all these different things. And what's common to health care and daycare and all the rest of it is you have a right to act without interference. The name for that is not health, but liberty. Liberty includes and subsumes the right to everything you can get on your own. Thank you, Paul. Think about it. Some people have asked, can people afford health care on their own? Let's leave aside the present government-inflated medical prices, because the answer is certainly people can afford it. Where is the money coming from right now to pay for it all? Where does the government get its fabled unlimited money? Government is not a productive organization. It has no source of wealth other than confiscation of the citizens' wealth through taxation, inflation, or the like. Now, some people think, well, it's really the rich who are paying the costs of medical care now. The rich, not the broad bulk of the people. But it's been proved time and time again that there are not enough